Hi, welcome to episode 3 of How to Hack Time. Today is very much going to be talking through some principles that can help you to get into flow state and also ultimately get more done in less time, how to hack time. So I'm going to talk through a couple of principles around productivity that you may again be familiar with, but some of these are so valuable and so useful. And I've just witnessed that most people don't, even though they know these are really good ideas, they don't actually use them and don't apply them in their average day. So I'm going to have to keep sometimes repeating certain ideas that are the way to get more done in less time. Yes, there's AI and yes, there's all manner of other ways of boosting our productivity. But from my perspective, one of the things is that there's nothing that is going to be being able to actually tap into what we already have as our biological computer. How can we get into flow state where creativity flows, where we're just in that zone where things happen? Well, we can create the conditions that can enhance our opportunity to access all of that. And ultimately, I mean, if we get a little bit grand and think about the future of humanity here, we are going to be using AI more and more for getting things done more quickly. But we're also going to need to balance AI and our own human selves, and an ability to master our own selves is, from my perspective, going to be really, really valuable and important as we, you know, avoid necessarily outsourcing everything to AI in terms of our own capacity. So you can already see if you're on a tube train now, I think it's about 95% of people have their heads buried, their heads are bent into a phone. It's outsourcing. Nobody daydreams anymore, even though, I mean, that's another video for another day, the power of daydreaming and the power of meditation, all these different things that can actually be part of how we support flow state, creativity, intuition, and our innate superpowers. So let's talk through a couple of techniques, a couple of hacks that you can go in and use forevermore that will help you to get into flow state more often. Well, number one, you may have heard this term before, rocks and gravel. What are we going to talk about here? Well, imagine you've got a jar, it's an empty jar, and that represents your 24 hours of your day or your working day. Now imagine you've got certain key important things to do in a particular day. Those are going to be your rocks. Your gravel is going to be the kind of less important or things that you can do when you're not necessarily in flow state. They're the things like certain emails, admin, certain things that you know you can do when you're not maybe at your most alert, your most energized. A lot of our day gets spent doing things that are like that. They need to be done. And if we don't get those things done, that can also actually drag our energy down. And sometimes they're slightly annoying things that we just know we have to get done. So we want to get balance between our rocks and our gravel. If we imagine we've got a jar here, now this jar has got, let's call them some rocks in there. I don't know if you can see that too well. There are actually dates in there in case you're curious. Now imagine you had just a few of these dates. You can put them into the jar, but imagine if you had a load of gravel at the bottom of your jar, it's going to be more difficult to put those dates in, those rocks, because if you imagine, you could actually pour gravel around those rocks and it will fill in the gaps. But if you put rocks on top of a whole load of gravel, then you've got all that empty space up the top. So the way to fill in our day most effectively is by putting in some of those rocks right at the beginning and then letting the gravel fall in later or falling in other parts of the day when we want to just mop up. So an example of this is my favorite, probably my favorite hack of all time, to be honest. In the past, I used to call it power hour. Another way of thinking about it is really your first 2 hours of the day. I've spoken to so many people about this topic, and when we think about first thing in the morning, we know typically our energy is fresh, our mind is fresh. It hasn't been, bamboozled by all the things that typically happen in a day in terms of distractions, annoying things, whatever else we're doing in terms of interactions. And so when we're in that first 2 hours, we've got an opportunity to get access to flow state more often. But what's often the case in terms of people's typical work behavior is they like to clear the decks in order to feel ready and right. Sometimes there's a bit about perfectionism to be able to tackle a rock. A rock, and I'm going to bring in another term here, which is all around this same topic. A great coach in the past called Brian Tracy, he would call it eating that frog, right? So really, you can think about your rocks. There's typically one rock that is your most important task of the day. It's the thing that if you get that one thing done, and if you can get it done while being in flow state. So I was picking my tissue up, but I didn't need to blow my nose. Um, if we're actually tackling that frog first thing in the morning, what a way to start a day, right? Because we typically can get in that first hour or two the most important task of the day, then the rest of the day is set up to be a success because you've already achieved success by about 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, it's not, if this all sounds great, but unfortunately, most people don't follow this. The number of times I get asked for a meeting at nine, between the hours of 9 and 10 in the morning, is unbelievable. I get offered more meetings first thing in the morning than I do in the afternoons. My policy is meetings and calls in the afternoons because I can talk to people and I can be quite fresh actually in a conversation and I can get things done in that way in an afternoon. Whereas in the mornings, I like to do my work that needs creative input. It needs, when you're doing something which is requires a bit of thought, a bit of input, a bit of intuition, a bit of whatever, it requires flow state. The best thing is do that in the morning, right? Now, what we therefore can do is do a bit of gravel, maybe first thing in the morning, just to feel kind of like we're warming ourselves up. But I would say we time boundary that. So most people like to get into their, all their apps on their phone and check, has anybody messaged me? Has anybody looked at my post on LinkedIn or whatever? Has anybody emailed me and it's an important email? So we could go into our email, for example, and just have maybe, I don't know, it's 15 minutes, even 30 minutes max, but do those things that maybe take 1 or 2 minutes. Maybe on one of these future sessions, I'll be talking about things like how do we filter things. So we might have emails that we're going to come to later. We put them in a separate folder, maybe. I don't have everything in one email inbox, I have, but I don't also filter to the nth degree. I have one folder called follow up that's an alternative to my inbox, right? So things are coming in and they're being funneled into, yeah, I'm going to follow up with that later. And then I know in my mind it's dealt with. It's a bit like a letter coming in through the post. It goes somewhere where I know I'm going to action it, but therefore it's then not in a pile of just mess. And it's kind of got a place that my mind can always be given the opportunity to be clear. Everything else, all the other distractions are filtered in their right appropriate place to be done later. Now I'm able, having done my half an hour, 15 minutes of checking email, dealing with anything urgent, and tackling that with the short turnaround sort of stuff, the stuff that takes longer, maybe I do later. I'm ready to eat that frog. Eat that frog. The reason why it's called a frog is because typically our most important task of the day, remember I made in the first video this uh, talk about Pareto's law. What's your 20% that you know is the most important activity and the most important stuff you're trying to achieve in your day, in your week, in your overall year, even in your 3-year plan or whatever, right? So, um, being able to do some work, a rock might be a way of chunking down that most important task you're doing into something that's manageable in an hour or two. But we do it. We avoid the procrastination. We avoid the distraction. And how do we do that? Because we've got a time boundary. We're saying, no, this is the time. It's carved out. You clear it. You don't let other people book things in that time. You don't jump on a call at 9:30 in the morning or 9 in the morning and just use up your best brain power. Do you really need that for just having a catch-up chat with somebody else? Not really. I mean, managers sometimes they like to book their diaries with a lot of meetings, fair enough. But when you're in the role of being somebody who needs to create something, which needs a bit of creative thinking, use your first couple of hours of the day. So we're putting in those rocks at the bottom of the jar, and then the brain can only concentrate really in one go for about, I think they call it 50 minutes. Now, often is the case, as you know, you can get into flow state and then you can end up just keeping on going and riding that wave for quite a while. I would say after about 50 minutes, it's quite good to take a break, do something which is just taking your mind out of that mode. So something physical, something emotional, get up, do some exercise, something that's going to break that pattern and then come back fresh. That's up to you if you want to do that. I know there's sometimes times when we can just go for 2 hours non-stop and we're in flow state because we're really absorbed in doing something we know is important. We're suddenly so excited that we're actually cracking on with something that's important and we're enjoying that state that we don't want to interrupt it. So fair enough. But this is rocks and gravel. We tackle that thing that's challenging. We let go of perfectionism because we've given ourselves a time boundary. Containers and time boundaries, as we talked about in episode 2 of this series, was Parkinson's law. We give ourselves a time boundary. And then when we got these containers, we then get very hardcore. You know how people get on a call and they say, I've got a hard stop at 1/2 past. Those hard stops are quite easy, I think. People quite often adhere to those because it's quite easy to say, look, Mr. Person I'm speaking to, I'm stopping this conversation in another 10 minutes, or I'm stopping this conversation in half an hour because we put in a boundary. Same thing with the 2 hours. Put in a boundary and then stick to it. And you'll find the more you get into that habit, the more you will actually be able to bed this in. I mean, they always say with new habits, do something for 30 days. Try and practice this experiment. You don't have to do it for an hour or 2 hours, whatever fits for you, but give yourself the opportunity to do your most important task at the beginning of your day and give yourself some sort of time boundary and get clear, obviously, in what you really want as part of this process. Otherwise, you're going to find it difficult to even know what your rock is sometimes. And as they say with rocks and with big uh, achieving big visions, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So, you're going to need to sometimes chunk things down so that you're still making it a stretch, but still manageable. That frog is still something that you can do. And also, I think I also talked in one of these previous episodes about giving yourself a task, which sometimes you're almost giving yourself more time than you think you even need. It's a way of actually training the brain into pain and pleasure decision making, and you actually end up starting the ball rolling. And then once you get cracking, you end up actually getting more done than you thought you would, and then in less time. So hopefully this is a reminder. This is something that I know this is old school productivity, time management stuff. Now, one thing I would add into the mix, there are these theories, these things that have been taught. I've picked them up from other people, I use them, I implement them, and I've observed myself that some of these things, it is about building habits. It's about overstepping the fear that comes up, in the form of procrastination and all these things, and learning how to do that. One of the ways to overcome these kind of blocks and fears about habits and behavior is through the process that I've talked in the past about called Psyche. It's part of my coaching proposition and toolkit these days. You can watch a video called Introduction to Psyche, which it's on my website. You can go and have a look. The link will be in the description. But aside from that, I mean, you can just apply rocks and gravel. It's a simple principle. It's just about deciding one day. It's your choice as always. It's making a decision to try something, to start using it, and then once you start building a habit, it becomes something. I do certain things every single day now that are my systems. I'll tell you about some more in the future. But rocks and gravel, I just that's a daily process for me now. I wouldn't do it any other way because it works for me, and I know that on human behavior level and on a way of getting into my flow state, it's just there's nothing like it for being able to. And ultimately, It all boils itself down to how do we, unfortunately, most of humanity is operating 180% in the upside down way, where we're controlled by habits that don't serve us. Otherwise, the world would be a much happier place, wouldn't it? If we could all go and achieve more of what we want to achieve and have less of what we want to have less of. Humans are in this funny setup in our minds where we're still being battered around by autopilot in the subconscious. It's an issue. So that's why I'm really making these videos to just give you some, hopefully some techniques and tools to try. If you want to go deeper, get in touch with me and we can do that as well. Do it with hypnosis. I don't care what method you do, but certainly Psyche is a process that widens out an opportunity for space to actually go into your own particular circumstances, identify what are your particular blockers. You know, when it comes to the psychology of behavior, sometimes there are some very deep-seated beliefs that we have, which can inform how we feel about time, how we feel about whatever we're working on. Do we even deserve to be working in a situation where we deserve full-blown success? Some people are afraid of success, and obviously some people are driven by a fear of failure and a fear of getting something wrong, or perfectionism kicks in, or it's just easier in the brain to get a little dopamine hit by doing something which is the gravel and feeling like this productivity. It's a myth, and I know that, you know, most people unfortunately are run by dopamine hits instead of getting big delayed gratification out of getting the difficult stuff done. So join me on this journey. I'll be making more videos like this. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to clock off and I will see you on the next video. Take care. Good luck. Bye.